Hey guys, back with another video. This time we're going to discuss kink settings in Blender's hair groom system, and you can read about it here, but today I'm going to show you on video. Okay, so let's hop into Blender, and here we have a basic hairstyle already set up without any kink settings enabled. Okay, so if I was to click on this, you'll notice I have used my standard procedure of creating a scalp object, and then created a hair groom on top of the scalp object, and this is what we've had. This is what I've come up with. Okay, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm also using this model, which is a bust, which I got from, which you can get from Sketchfab. It's free for non-commercial use. So here we are. This is Sketchfab. You can get it from Riceart. It's free for non-commercial use with attribution. So if you want to follow exactly along, you can get it from here. Okay, back in Blender. So let me explain to you what the kink settings are. Okay, the kink settings are probably the most powerful tool that you have to alter the look and feel of your hairstyle. And it can be accessed from the children setting. So in order for you to use kinks, you actually need to enable children. Right now, if I don't enable children, this is what the hairstyle looks like with just the 1000 emissions. This is grayed out because I have done some manual editing. I'll make another video about that later. But if you were to enable interpolated mode, it'll give you a couple of options here, including the kink setting at the bottom over here. Okay, so let's expand this kink setting, and you can see right now there's no kink applied at all. Under the drop down, you can see there's a few options. Let me bring this up a little bit. Okay, there's a few options. There's the curl setting, a radial setting, wave setting, braid, and spiral. Okay, so these are the 5 different kinks that you have. So let's just see what happens when I enable the curl setting. Immediately things go haywire. Okay, and this is because it looks kind of cool, but it is not what you're expecting. And this is because for whatever reason the amplitude of the curl setting is set way too high. Okay, it's at 0.2 meters, so that's something like 20 centimeters. So the curl is supposed to be 20 centimeters in size. That's too big. So let's bring this down to something like 2 centimeters, and the effect almost completely disappears. And that's because it's controlled by the other setting, which is frequency. Okay, if I were to slowly increase the frequency, you start to see the hair curling up. Okay, and it really starts to become curly. And we can really curl this up. I think 10 is the max setting. Okay, I'm not sure whether we can go higher than 10. Oh yeah, we can. You can type in, so the max default setting is 10, but you can go higher than that. So here we have a setting of 15, and this is our curl setting. Pretty cool. And we can get really curly hair. Okay, so let's just take a look at this in rendered mode. Okay, so this is what we've got. Let's pump this up to like 25. Okay, so you can really see what's happening here. There we go. Okay, so let's go back to non-rendered mode. So that's how the kink curl works. So essentially, and to explain this again, the size of the curls are controlled by this amplitude, which you want to be really subtle with, because if you ramp this up too high, and you can go in the minus direction as well to reverse the size of the curl. Okay, if you increase this too high, this could be it's not going to look good. And also remember that this amplitude is an absolute value, it's not a relative value. So in this particular case, it's 0.02 meters, or 2 centimeters in other words. And it will really depend on the size of your model. For whatever reason, if you're going to use a giant model, then the amplitude of the curls will have to reflect that. So it's probably best to stay within a realistic scale and keep the amplitude to a realistic value. Okay. The other factor is this clumping. Right now it doesn't do anything at all, and that's because we don't enable clumping. So let's enable clumping so you can see immediately that the hairs clump together at the bottom. Okay, and if we were to reduce this clumping, you'll start to see that the curls are less affected by the clumps, or more affected by the clumping. Okay, but individual hairs still are affected by the clumping. It's just the curl effect is less affected by clumping. Okay, so that's what we see here, the influence of clumping on this kink. The other thing is flatness, and if we were to reduce this, you'll flatten the hair. It won't have any thickness. Okay, and if you do it the other way, you'll separate them out more. Okay, do you see? When I bring them, it's separated out to 0, and then you flatten them. So in case you were looking for some curls that were much more tighter without much separation, this is how you do it with the flatness. Okay, cool. And then the frequency, like I've already explained, adjusts how many curls you're gonna see. Okay, and the less curls the less frequency means the less curls. So you can see here now we have less curls. And finally we come to the shape, which will adjust where the curls stand. Now you see, as I bring it here, the curls are heavily concentrated at the root, and at this level it's pretty much, you know, gone because it's just squashed onto the root. And if I were to bring it to the other side, all the curls are squashed onto the tip of the hair. So absolutely maxed values is not good. So if you were to do something like this, for example, you can now add some curls, and I feel like this is a bit too much. Okay, you can add some curls. Let's look at it in rendered mode, to the ends of your hair using the shape. If you take a look here, then I think we need to add a little bit of thickness here. Okay, just give it some time to render. I'm just adding some thickness here just so you can see. Okay, you can see that there's curls at the bottom but not at the top, and that's because of the way the shape works. So shape, generally speaking, controls where along the length of the hair, okay, the effect will start and stop. That's what shape does. So if it's at this minus value, it's usually the root side. So we could keep it somewhere like here, and it'll be like halfway from the root. Okay, give it some time to render. Okay, so we have the curls at the top, but not so much at the tips. Give it a few seconds to render. So this can be a cool effect as well, depending on what kind of hairstyle you're going for. So even though it says curl, it doesn't have to be curly hair. It can be much more subtler curls. You can even make it almost like waves, depending on how you want to go. But if you really wanted waves, okay, let's just get out of rendered mode so we can do this a little faster. If you really wanted waves, you can actually get waves separately using the wave setting. But before that, let's touch on radial. Okay, now radial, let's default all of these settings by pressing backspace on all of them, and that'll just bring everything back to default. And when you bring the radial setting, you'll see that there's nothing happening. Okay, part of the reason for this is because and if I increase the amplitude, you just see a big mess here. Okay, so that's not what we want to adjust. Okay, but we can increase the frequency for radio. Okay, and then it'll become a little bit more visible. Okay, now radial creates a weird effect where the hairs will intersect with the parent. Okay, so I'm gonna reduce this display so you can see this properly. But if we increase this radial effect, you can see here they kind of intersect like this. Let's go with like a frequency of 10. They intersect with the parent strand. Okay, so if I would increase this, you'll start to see that we kind of clump in waves, almost like a very harsh wave like this. Okay, and that can create a certain kind of effect, especially a more messier effect. Okay, and you can again control the shape by making it start at the top, only at the bottom, you know. So that's one option. Or you can control the frequency. I'm pretty sure you can go beyond 10 by increasing the frequency like this, and it'll create like this kind of shape. Or you can change the flatness, which flattens it the same way that flatten for curl does, but in this particular case it flattens the radial effect like this way rather than this way. Okay, take a look. Okay, and there you have it. This is radial. Just keep in mind that it really, everything depends on how much of the amplitude it is. If you just go crazy, you can do something really absurd. Okay, so let's make this default again. Okay, so that was the radial setting. Let's now check out wave, much more common effect. Now immediately it creates pretty great waves. As you can see, we can reduce the amplitude even further to create a more subtle effect. Let's just, you know, increase it a bit. We can increase the frequency, you know, and this can kind of have a similar effect to curls, but it's instead of a curl, instead of like a helix, like a spiral, it's creating just a wave. So the hairs just wave. And the flatten does the same thing with this. It just brings the clumps together, or you can bring it, keep it apart. You can increase the frequency to increase the number of waves, or you can decrease it. And the shape once again starts the wave at the bottom, or closer to the roots, closer to the bottom, and 0 is centered, so that 0 is just even on both sides. And that's how waves work. Okay, and you might notice that most of these settings tend to repeat in all the kinks, and that's normal. Some of them have, for example, this clump setting, clump influence. Some of them don't, but that doesn't matter because most of the settings are quite similar. Depending on what you're looking for, you can change. You might have some additional settings that you can change. Now let's go to braid. Braid is another interesting one. Let's bring this all back to defaults, and immediately you can see a huge mess. This doesn't look anything like a braid. To make this more visible, I'm just gonna ramp this strand steps up to 10. That's really gonna slow things down sometimes, and bring the amplitude down quite a bit. Okay, and then I'm gonna increase the frequency to 10. Okay, and maybe not 10, maybe 5. And basically this creates like a sort of braided kink, like little random braided elements. Okay, if I flatten this, might be able to see it a bit better. In fact, let's bring this down to something like 2 so we can really see it. So you can see here that these clumps are kind of braiding with each other, but it's a bit random. Okay, it's a bit random because it's not supposed to be a very exact setting, okay, because this is not like an actual human controlled braid of hair. This is just like a sort of a hair kink where the hairs tend to get braided automatically over time or whatever. Okay, so if you increase it, you can see this is the look. We can go to rendered mode to see a better preview. Come on, okay, here we go. So you see, it's kind of creating these braided hair clumps. You can reduce the influence of the clumps as well. I'm just gonna go back to regular mode because rendering takes a while when I'm recording. And you can see that it reduces the clumping effect, but if I just bring it up again, it increases it. We can increase the frequency to have more braiding, but the higher the frequency, the tendency for the hairs to do weird stuff or to misbehave is higher, because this effect is a little aggressively moving the hairs. So sometimes you might have weird bugs like this. Okay, so it's important to keep this setting a little under control. And another factor for braids is the strand steps. Okay, and I have a video explaining how strand steps work in both the viewport and the render. Strand steps of viewport is here, render is here. You want this number to be high enough that you can see this. If I was to bring this down to something like 2, all of a sudden the braids disappear, because there's only 1, 2, 3, 4. There's like 2 points, 2 or 3 points somewhere here. Okay, if I bring this up to 3, 4, you can see the resolution is improving. Okay, so up to 10. If I bring this up to 15, a little worried this might crash my PC. Okay, I think 10 is the max on the viewport display. Okay, but I usually keep it at 8, and that tends to work well. But the more detailed your hair is, the more strand steps you're going to need. Okay, and you can increase this even further on the render, but be careful. The higher this number, the more processing power you're going to need to render it. So 8 is pretty good. Now let's reset all these values. Okay, and let's quickly look at the last one, which is spiral. And as soon as I set spiral, you can immediately see there's something weird happening at the bottom. I'm getting these triangles. Okay, these triangle shapes, and that's because the spiral is working, but the spiral has some different settings than the others. So here we have the amplitude, so that's the, if I just gradually increase this, you can see the size of the triangle is increasing. Okay, so let's just keep it somewhere here. Then we have the randomize amplitude, which will randomize the amplitude such that the triangle's sizes will change. Okay, let's just keep this down for now. Okay, and then we have the steps. Okay, and this is going to be, we have a triangle because there's only 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you were to increase this, we can start to get circles, you know, and the max is like 100. and at 100 it just creates these cool circles. So let's bring these circles down a little bit, okay? And maybe we can randomize it. For now we'll just keep it as it is, and then you can change the frequency. So the frequency determines how many times, so let's just go to 0, okay, and then increase. How many times does it keep spiraling? So if you just want something like this, you can give it half circle. As soon as you go to 1, it becomes 1 full spiral, and as soon as you go beyond 1, it just keeps increasing the spirals. Okay, so 2 was 2 spirals, I think. Okay, and that's what this frequency is controlling, the number of spirals at the end. So the spiral setting does not really control most of the hair, it just controls the ends and how it's spiraling at the very end. You might also notice all the hairs are kind of spiraled in one particular direction, and that's because of the axis. It's currently set to Z. If I set it to Y, for example, it'll spiral in a different direction, you know, and if I set it to X, it'll spiral yet another direction. Okay, so let's just set it back to Z, or you know, Y is kind of nice. And then if we randomize it, we can get some random size spirals. You can see each spiral is a bit random, and we can randomize the axis if you want to kind of have wildly different directions that it's pointing in. And finally we have, let's just, you know, turn this off so we can see better. I think C was more easy to see. Okay, and let's test what shape does. Okay, shape kind of pushes it out like this, which can be really crazy, or makes it smaller. Okay, and if you notice, you're really only controlling the size of the circle, not anything else. 0 is here, and you control the size of each spiral. So if I was to make this 4, for example, you'll see even further circles. And if I was to increase this beyond this, it'll get bigger, like this. Okay, but I feel like it's a little unrealistic, so this is kind of interesting. So this can create some stylized looks, some interesting hairstyles. Okay, so if you go to rendered mode, we can take a look at how it looks here. Here's some interesting looking stylized looks. Okay, and that's what spiral is. Now if we were to drop the strand steps, we would make it look much less circular and much more jaggedy, but the max steps seems to be about 100. I think we can type in a bigger number, but you want to be a bit careful with this because too many steps is going to increase the processing requirement as well. And that's it. That's all the hair kinks that are available to you, and you can do pretty much almost any kind of hairstyle with these kinks. When I say hairstyle, I'm talking about like the nature of the hair. Is it curly? Is it rough? Is it wavy? You know, those are called kinks in Blender, and that's what you can modify with this and create almost any kind of look. In combination with every other feature, you can create pretty fantastic hairstyles. Okay, once again guys, check out my article here and you can read about this as well and follow along. You can also check out the other article I have written, the second part, which introduces how to create a bunch of different hairstyles as well. And I will be creating more videos, so stay tuned for that. See you in the next one.